Luke chapter 13, verses 31 through 35. Hear the word of the Lord. At that very hour, some Pharisees came and said to Jesus, "Get away from here, for Herod wants to kill you." Jesus said to them, "Go and tell that fox for me. Listen, I am casting out demons and performing cures today and tomorrow, and on the third day I will finish my work. Yet today, tomorrow, and the next day I must be on my way, because it is impossible for a prophet to be killed outside of Jerusalem. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to it. How often have I desired to gather your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, and you were not willing. See, your house is left to you, and I tell you, you will not see me until the time comes when you say, 'Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord.'" The word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. Lord Acton famously framed power as a corrupting influence in our lives. The more we wield it, the worse we wield it. We become insensitive to its corrupting influence on our actions and even our perceptions of the world around us. We most commonly define power by its destructive force. We think of power in terms of bombs, explosions, earthquakes, and hurricane-force winds. This murderous nature of power seems to captivate us, while the power God wields has an altogether different quality. Are we willing to give up on murderous power to embrace something completely different? I grew up with the notion that Pharisees were Jesus' enemies. That concept arose from the same stream of anti-Semitism behind framing the Jews in general as those who killed Jesus. My wife recently mentioned a comment that Jesus was much more likely to have been a Pharisee than an Essene like John the Baptist. That was a shock to my system. I looked into it. Her source was right. While we read the gospel text through a lens that still contains anti-Semitic perspectives, we miss some of the nuance in the gospels, especially what shows up loud and clear in today's passage. Sure, there were Pharisees whom Jesus called down, just as he called down his own disciples. There were also Pharisees in his own retinue of followers like Nicodemus and Joseph of Arimathea. We find in today's passage that some Pharisees came to warn Jesus of Herod's plans for his assassination. Being a Pharisee was broader than any specific script akin to what I gathered in my upbringing. In general, it meant one was seeking something akin to John Wesley's idea of faith which impacted one's daily living in what he called scriptural holiness. The Pharisees understood that faith needed to be more than simply going through the prescribed rites, rituals, and sacrifices. Jesus' issue with many of them was the same issue he had with others. As human beings, they did not allow God's transformation to embed itself deeply enough into their lives. Their transformation stopped short of sifting their perspectives off human designs to fully embody Yahweh's will. Today's passage might help us understand that a bit better. These Pharisees were concerned to protect Jesus' life from one who wanted him dead. I find no fault there. Theirs was an expression of concern for Jesus' well-being. They wanted something good for him. Their intentions were pure. These were good people. They were warning him so he might continue living, teaching, healing, and otherwise ministering in God's name. They deserve a round of applause. Jesus didn't see it that way. Oh well, Jesus rarely sees things the way I do. He does not offer them thanks for trying to save his life. He does not run away to some safe place in the wilderness to be fed by ravens. He does not flee to the country as a refugee in Egypt as his parents had done during his childhood. He turns to these people seeking to protect his life and gives them a strongly worded message for King Herod, the origin of this threat against him. I taught my kids not to kick a hornet's nest. Jesus missed that. He addresses Herod directly, calling him out for who and what he is. He minces no words to protect anyone's feelings. He says the quiet part out loud, calling out Herod's participation in the heritage of so many others who had similarly attacked Yahweh's prophets time and again. Jesus embraced the conflict with Herod with open acceptance. He would continue speaking for God despite Herod's plans to kill him. We've been hearing stories from Russia about people speaking against military aggression toward Ukraine and being imprisoned for it. It should not be surprising. This is the standard human way to cling to power, silencing all opposition, especially by those who fear losing their grasp on power. Herod was that same kind of ruler, known to play rough with people like John the Baptist, who had called him out for his adultery. Jesus would not have expected any milder treatment. He was pretty sure where things were already headed. It was expected. History anticipated it. It was a pattern of the conflict between those in power and those speaking for Yahweh. Herod wanted to keep power. He wanted to protect his authority, status, wealth, and control. Whatever got in the way, whoever even questioned the validity of his position, even regarding a claim of divine appointment, was a personal threat he could not abide. No one questioned him openly, much less to his face. Jesus was already aware, however, that his prophetic message was in conflict, at least with aspects of Herod's reign. He knew, like anyone else, that no one could give complete support to Herod or any other political figure, and likewise follow the direction of Yahweh's prophets. No one can do that with any human figure. Samuel, Nathan, Elijah, Elisha, Micaiah, Isaiah, Jeremiah, and so many others had found their own prophetic tasks, placing them at odds with those in power. Only a false prophet can give unqualified support to a political leader, party, or any other institution. At some point, we all shy away from God's direction for our lives. The prophetic voice is charged with calling us back onto the path God has for us. Not the path we have chosen, not what seems right in our own eyes. None of us is infallible. Elijah had to be redirected by God. Jeremiah was directed to do things he did not want to do. Jonah followed Yahweh's instructions only because he could not escape them, even though he tried. Moses was called down more than once. Jesus had to redirect John the Baptist at least twice, his own disciples repeatedly. All too often, we find ourselves in the same boat with Jesus' disciples and those prophets of old. We want to think that we speak for God. Then God comes along to redirect us. That's where the fun starts. That's where we struggle with the need to allow God's redirection, like these Pharisees who had come to Jesus and his own disciples in short order. God would redirect them all. Time and again throughout scriptures, we find Yahweh was not too proud to wield even a donkey to redirect a prophet, raise up a great fish to spit one back on the shore, or even speak through women of an enemy nation to get a prophet's attention. We also find repeatedly that those of us who would claim to follow God are consistently called down as members of a stiff-necked people, refusing to embrace God's direction. Jesus' words to these Pharisees called out Herod for his scheming abuse of power. They also called out these Pharisees for misunderstanding God's purposes regarding Jesus and what still needed to happen. The message would prelude a conversation Jesus would have with his own disciples. They also would attempt to calling Jesus down for speaking of his impending death. We don't do well with Jesus' response to murderous intent. None in the crowd wanted to hear Jesus' words, that he would be killed like other prophets who had gone to Jerusalem to speak for Yahweh in response to those wielding murderous power. These Pharisees and the disciples alike seemingly only understood the destructive force in Herod's hand, despite Jesus wielding an altogether different power of God. Power to heal, restore, cast out the stranglehold of abusive power. His response was that, yes, he would die at the hands of Herod's murderous power. Yet God's power to redeem and restore would live on. Is that not a much greater prize? Why would we cling to murderous power when God offers power to rebuild, restore, to make right?